First World War is about to end. An American soldier remembers how peace came.
The morning of November the 11th, 1918, Harry met me about 100 yards from the battery position. He says, "Look here, McKinley." He had a piece of white paper just about as big as your hand. It says, "Cease firing on all fronts. 11-11-11, General John J. Pershing." And I thought that was the prettiest piece of paper I ever saw. Words can't describe the feeling that have come over the men, not only me, but the rest of them. 1 minute we was killing people, and then the world was at peace first time in 4 years. It seemed like 5 minutes, and directly one old boy says, "When'll we go home?"
All along the Western Front, the soldiers who have been fighting each other share the joy of being alive.
Je venais d'être blessé. Alors on est arrivé à l'hôpital.
I'd just been wounded. We arrived at the hospital and they gave us coffee.
The
doctor came to see us. He said, "They've signed the armistice, boys."
Then
I threw myself on my bed and cried. I thought of my mother. She must know that we're alive.
And when the fighting is over and the war is won, and the flags are waving free, when the bells are ringing and the boys are singing songs of victory, and when we all gather round.
As they celebrate, the crowds hope the world has learnt a lesson and that peace is here to stay.
Oh, the lashes will be loving all the laddies, who fought and
But over the next 20 years, that hope would fail. The war had bathed the new century in blood. The endless fields of gravestones were a lasting reminder of the carnage. Nine million had been killed by tactics in which commanders threw life away cheaply for a few yards of ground. A whole generation was traumatized by the horror of the trenches.
What I thought about most was the pals that I'd left behind me who would never see home again. They gave their lives, and they didn't know what they were giving them for. They were giving their lives to end wars, which didn't end wars.
Walter Hare had fought in the Battle of the Somme.
I'd been one of the lucky ones. I'd survived, and I hoped and felt that this was the end of war for all of us. I was thankful that I was at home. I was thankful that my brother had survived too, and I was thankful that none of my people had suffered because of the war. But I felt sorry for all those people who had, and especially those people in our village who had lost some of their lads.
He was 20, with his life still before him. All the combatants felt the same emotions, whether their side had won or lost. In Munich, Karl Nagel watched as the German troops came back.
It was a relief for the whole nation that the war was over. We had to wait and see what the consequences would be. As a small boy, I was happy my father was home, that the family was together, and we counted on him to bring family life back to normal.
He hoped he'd never have to fight like his father. The world's hopes of a lasting peace were focused on one man. When President Woodrow Wilson arrived for the peace conference to be held in Paris, he was hailed like a new messiah. He had taken America into the war in 1917, given new hope to the exhausted British and French armies, and ensured an Allied victory.
He
doffed his hat left and right. He was very polite. Everyone shouted, "Long live America." We knew they were our saviors. So he was really acclaimed in Paris and everywhere he went. The atmosphere was one of high patriotism because we'd won the war.
Wilson promised the crowds who received him so rapturously a people's peace. By this he meant a peace based on his own high principles, a lenient peace that would last and be fair to all. Other leaders, like Britain's Lloyd George and Francis Clemenceau, had a less idealistic sense of what their people wanted. They knew the popular clamour for revenge on Germany. As they negotiated the settlement to be signed at the Palace of Versailles, Wilson set the agenda. He wanted self-determination and democracy to be the guiding principles. An entirely new organization, the League of Nations, was intended to bring justice between countries. It was agreed in the Great Hall of Mirrors. But to ensure Germany could never threaten her security again, France insisted that the Germans be handicapped by having to pay the full cost of the war in reparations. German representatives were summoned. With no chance to negotiate, they were forced to accept their guilt and sign a punitive settlement.
Nachdem die Bedingungen des Versailler Vertrags bekannt geworden waren,
when the terms of the Treaty of Versailles were announced, the German people were dismayed about the conditions that were imposed, dismayed at everything that was expected of us, dismayed at the payments we had to make, that were sure to lead the German nation to ruin.
Die das deutsche Volk zum Ruin führen mussten.
The treaty, setting up the League of Nations, scheduling war reparations, redrawing frontiers, was meant to prevent war ever happening again. But few who welcomed the settlement at the time wanted to acknowledge the problems it was storing up for the future. For the moment, the anger of the Germans could be ignored by the victors, but German resentment would grow. The Russians had no part in the treaty. The new communist regime was still unrecognized. And the main architect of the peace, Wilson, was soon to find that many Americans at home wanted nothing to do with his League of Nations. They'd sent 2 million of their sons to sort out Europe's problems, and the sooner they came back, the better. McKinley Wooden's regiment headed for the docks.
When we left St. Nazaire, we was all tickled to be on the boat headed for home. The boys was all glad to get on it, and it started out, one looked over his shoulder and says, "I love to see France over my shoulder." We bid Europe goodbye. We didn't think we'd ever have to be back.
Returning British soldiers were also happy to put the continent of Europe behind them. Walter Hare came home to Yorkshire.
The villagers, after we'd been home, a week or two I think it was, they arranged for a coming home party for the lads. It was nice, very happy, we had a good meal and a lot of sing-song and sort of a get-together. Some of us were courting with our girlfriends again and quite a happy do.
Europe was transformed after Versailles. Up to 1918, Germany had dominated Northern Europe from Berlin, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire extended from Vienna. Now Germany was much smaller, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire was broken up. The 1920s were a springtime of nations, as 3 empires disappeared and 9 new countries came into being, each with its own pride. In Warsaw, Poles proclaimed their independence, led by Marshal Pilsudski. The Polish people's re-emergence in an independent nation was a triumph for nationalist longing and the fulfillment of a dream. Other new nations emerged from the wreckage of the Habsburg Empire. Yugoslavia was a compromise. The Serb, Croat, Slovene and other peoples it contained temporarily suppressed their old feuds in one independent kingdom. A Republic of Czechoslovakia was proclaimed in Prague. Up to then, the Czechs had been subjects of Austro-Hungary. Jiří Sturza saw the change of power.
A takhle nějak odpoledne, ve všední den, když už jsem byl doma ze školy,
it was a weekday afternoon.
tak jsem šel s mojí
I was back
tetou.
from school and my aunt took me down to the main
Jsme šli
street.
dolů na hlavní ulici, na hlavní silnici. No a
There was a big crowd there and we met our neighbour, a police
spousta
inspector.
lidí chodila a potkali jsme policejního inspektora,
He
našeho
asked my
souseda.
aunt, Madam,
Takový starší
have you
pán
heard
s
the news?
knírkem pod nosem,
No, I haven't.
který povídá tetě,
Well,
jestli pak
we
víte,
have no
paní, co
Austrian
nového?
Empire anymore. We have our own
No,
state.
nevím. Už nemáme Rakousko. Už máme vlastní stát.
The man who'd worked unceasingly for Czech independence, Thomas Masaryk, came back from exile. Masaryk believed democracy could unite all the peoples of Czechoslovakia, including the German speakers in the Sudetenland region next to the German border. His granddaughter was at the station.
There was many people all screaming, cheerful, embracing each other, weeping. And of course, and I have asked, well, why? Why do you weep? Everybody is so happy. And she said the only word, we have freedom.
The new nations hoped to protect their fragile freedom through the international body that met for the first time in 1920. The League of Nations held its first meeting in a Swiss hotel. Its supporters shared an optimistic belief that a new era of international relations was beginning. They were undeterred by the fact that the Americans weren't there, Congress had refused to join, and that the Russians and the Germans weren't members either. They believed the League could replace the bad old world of secret diplomacy with open discussion. Public opinion would always be listened to. Weak countries would have a voice as well as the strong. Poland's Prime Minister, the pianist Paderewski, called it the dawn of a new order. The League tried to build up popular support for its work. Jennifer Hart campaigned for the idea in Britain.
My role in the League of Nations Union was to try and get members of the public to understand the ideas behind the League, especially that it was a totally new thing, especially this concept of one was concerned if nation A was attacking nation B, you couldn't just stand on the sidelines, and to get public opinion to bring pressure on government to use the machinery of the League. So one didn't go around looking for faults in the government or weaknesses so much as saying, look, it's a wonderful new construction and it could be made to work if people really wanted to make it work.
Many saw the first priority as disarmament. If the League could only get nations to agree to reduce their weapons, then the threat of war would be removed. Germany was almost completely disarmed in the early 1920s as a condition of Versailles. Though Britain, the United States and Japan agreed to limit their navies, the World Disarmament Conference, so many expected, was constantly postponed. But the League of Nations did begin to put another Wilsonian ideal into practice: self-determination. For the first time, some minorities were given a chance to choose which country they wanted to be in. Plebiscites were held in several regions that had been part of Germany. On the border of Denmark and Germany, people voted to be Danish. But for each winner, there were losers. Each result created a new wave of refugees. Though they'd won their plebiscite, German speakers on part of the new Polish-German border were driven from their homes, and the Poles took the territory anyway. To German eyes, the Poles had seized what was rightfully German. The sense that they'd been robbed only added to German grievances. They'd seen their territory reduced. They'd been forced to pay back the cost of the war in installments that could last till 1988. And their economy was soon crippled by hyperinflation.
Prices rose daily, not just by a few marks, but hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands. We were playing football and one of my friends said, "I'm going to the shop to buy a couple of rolls." He had a 500,000 mark note on it. But he only came back with one, because a roll now cost 400,000. If you couldn't spend the little money you had on food quickly, you went hungry.
The German economy remained weak. Then it was devastated by the Depression after 1929. Over 6 million were unemployed. The Germans blamed the dictated peace for their troubles.
I'm afraid I didn't feel any pity for them, because it was the people of the German people had started the war, so they deserved to suffer. Because we hadn't started it, we'd had to suffer something they had nothing to do with. So what I was concerned was to get back to normal life again and forget Germany.
It had been so unpleasant that we didn't have much pity for them. We were sorry for them, but we'd say, tough, they've got what they deserve. They were hard on the countries they'd occupied. They did things that were too horrible. They gave hell to everybody in the invaded countries.
Je peux pas vous raconter, c'est trop horrible. Ils ont fait des misères à tout le monde dans les pays envahis.
For the French, like the British, forgiving had little place in the public mood of the time. Enjoying the peace they felt they deserved, the French were preoccupied with their own recovery. Post-war Paris, with big bands like Gregor and his Grégoriens, had a spirit of its own. A spirit in which German grievances and requests to pay less in reparation got short shrift. When great new memorials to the dead were completed 10 years after the war, people were reminded of the slaughter. A stream of visitors made the pilgrimage to the recent battlefields in France and Belgium to see the trenches where a generation had fallen. The war still haunted the minds of those who had fought in it.
The dreams were, some of them were pretty horrible. Sometimes you dreamt about getting through the barbed wire, and sometimes you dreamt about seeing Germans approaching with fixed bayonets, and other times you could see the ground being swept in front of you with German machine guns, and you're being told you're going to advance over that ground, which was a shocking feeling.
A new wave of novels and films rekindled the sense of horror. In All Quiet on the Western Front, ordinary soldiers discussed the absurdity of war.
Well, how do they start a war?
Well, one country offends another.
How could one country offend another? You mean there's a mountain over in Germany gets mad at a field over in France?
Well, stupid, one people offend another.
Oh, that's it. I shouldn't be here at all. I don't feel offended.
It don't apply to tramps like you.
Good. Then I can be going home right away.
You just try it. Yeah, you want to get shot?
The anti-war films increased public impatience for disarmament. When the League of Nations finally arranged the World Disarmament Conference for 1932, expectations rose.
And we are going to go to Geneva to get the nations of the world to join in and reduce this enormous, disgraceful burden of armaments which we are now bearing from one end of the world to the other.
In Geneva, the conference took delivery of mass petitions collected from around the world. The millions of signatures were designed to put pressure on governments and show how people expected them to banish war.
I went to one of the opening sessions of the conference when people came from all over the world petitioning for disarmament, and it was meant to be a tremendous moment. We all had great hopes that there really was going to be very substantial disarmament.
Australie, 1102-108. Australia, 112,108. And Fiji...
The final tally was announced as the conference began.
United States of America, 1,135,453, and Hawaii, 130.
There are lunatics in every country who really want the attempt to organize peace to be abandoned. No one doubts that disarmament is possible, but the common man wants to know whether the governments with great military, naval and air forces are really in earnest in their desire for peace. If they are, a disarmament treaty can be framed. And if it is accepted, the whole international atmosphere will change as if by magic.
But international idealism clashed with old-style national self-interest. Arriving in New York, Poland's former Prime Minister Paderewski explained the problem.
Mr. Paderewski, what is your opinion about disarmament and your recent efforts in order to eliminate the possibilities of war?
It's a very good intention, very fine idea, but a very difficult task. Everyone expects the other fellow to disarm, but is not ready to disarm himself.
The trust in what democracy and reason might do was increasingly shaken. The Germans, still bitter at their treatment, brought a new leader to power, Adolf Hitler. Karl Nagel, now training to be a policeman, saw him in Munich.
I stood in the crowd as Hitler drove past. When he saluted us, we hailed him and shouted. Hitler tried to remove the burdens that the Treaty of Versailles had imposed on Germany. Hitler promised work and bread for all Germans. He promised to eliminate the high unemployment. He promised to make Germany a nation that could show its face in Europe.
The Italians, also dissatisfied with the peace, were given the same assurances. Mussolini promised them a new Roman Empire. Millions of Italians rejoiced in the seeming miracle of fascism. In 1935, Mussolini's forces invaded Ethiopia. The Ethiopians and their emperor stood no chance against a modern army. Though the League of Nations issued resolution after resolution, the Italians defied them.
The League of Nations, a grave disturbance. Today, Haile Selassie comes to plead for his lost empire. He wants them to make Mussolini give up Ethiopia.
His Majesty Negus Haile Selassie, I call upon the first delegate of Ethiopia.
Italian newspapermen are ready for an outbreak against the emperor whose country their country has taken, waiting for his first words.
From the platform. Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le...
Trying to quell the disturbance, lights turned out. The disturbers ejected, arrested, and he is able to make his appeal.
የሚገባውን ትክክለኛ ፍርድ ለመጠየቅ ዛሬ በዚህ ቀርቤያለሁ። ምክንያቱም ወታደሮቹ ቦምቡ በወደቀ ጊዜ ጋዙን ነፋስ እስኪወስደው ድረስ መበታተኑን ስላወቁበት ነው።
But the League lacked the will to help the emperor. The failure to save Ethiopia came just as the League moved into new headquarters, a monument to the dream of Woodrow Wilson. The magnificent building was said to be specially designed for peacemaking. But in the meantime, the League had been defied by Mussolini's invasion of Ethiopia, as well as Japan's seizure of Manchuria. America still wasn't a member. Germany had been admitted, but Hitler had taken it out again. In a League film made to enlist public support, an official listed the backlog of work.
Political problems are dealt with by the Council or the Assembly, and for this purpose, the political section prepares the work and executes the decisions. Here are some recent problems: the Sino-Japanese disputes, the Ethiopia-Italy disputes, the Charco disputes, the Letitia disputes, the problems of Danzig, the settlement of the Assyrians, the Saar plebiscite, and the return of the territory to Germany.
With the League's failure to deal with the dictators, the idea of disarmament was dying.
At the new home of the League of Nations in Geneva, the chief news is of nations arming. It is announced that Britain will spend more on armaments. Why? Because the whole world is arming. Japan demands parity on the sea with Britain and the United States. She wishes to supplement her great military strength by greater sea power. Germany is building aeroplanes, commercial craft, but perhaps convertible. Her right to rearm is being tacitly recognized. Aeroplanes for Italy, thousands of them lined up in spectacular array. Mussolini has fostered an air force which challenges comparison with the finest in the world. France maintains her military strength, trains artillery, mechanizes her powerful army. France demands security and will not disarm. And Britain, long content with dominance on the sea, contemplates bigger estimates for all three services.
Only the United States kept out of the new arms race.
The cattle prowl and the coyotes howl out on that great divide. I never done no wrong. Just
McKinley Wooden was now farming in Kansas.
down the trail I ride.
I was in the feed and grain business long about that time. I had a lot of livestock on the side. Had the best feedlot in the county. People thought that the world was at peace, and they was awful glad it was. We wasn't interested in any foreign countries at that time, mister. We was interested in our own selves and at home.
In Washington, Senator Nye spoke for the isolationists.
Americans want no more war. Most of all, they want no more participation in foreign wars. If another European war is to come, it is not going to be a simple matter for America to stay out of it. American commercial interests, selfish and greedy, sensing the opportunity for profit from war, would do as they have done in the past if left to pursue their own course.
In Europe, the fear of a new war was growing all the time. Winston Churchill, then a political outsider, took part in a radio series about the causes of war.
I'm afraid that if you look intently at what is moving towards Great Britain, you will see that the only choice open is the old grim choice our forebears had to face, namely, whether we shall submit or whether we shall prepare. This truth may be unfashionable, unpalatable, no doubt unpopular, but is it the truth?
Others still clung on to the ideal of collective security through the League of Nations. They made a film shown in thousands of cinemas.
£2,000 million a year spent on arms.
I'd fight tomorrow if I thought a war would end war, but that's what they told my father in 1914, and we're no better off now.
When there's a quarrel between two people, the police are called in to settle it. Why can't the League of Nations be strong enough to settle disputes between two nations?
Permanent peace can be secured by discussion. I've no quarrel with Frenchmen or Germans or Russians or anybody else for that matter. So let's be sensible and work together for peace by reasoning.
Write to your MP.
Pacifists took a more extreme position. They renounced war altogether. In 1936, the Peace Pledge Union appealed to people to sign declarations not to take part in war. Donald Soper was a campaigner.
It was comparatively easy to persuade an audience
of the rightness of what you were asking them to believe, and also, to some extent, dangerously easy to ask them at that point to sign along the dotted line. We had a great deal of immediate conversion. The problem was to maintain the ardor and spirit of it when the workaday problems associated with it became more complicated and more difficult.
Maintaining the ardor and spirit of pacifism was also more difficult because of the civil war in Spain. A nationalist revolt led by General Franco and backed by Hitler and Mussolini raised fears that more of Europe would fall to fascism. The rebels made a ruthless assault on the democratically elected Republican government. The loss of life convinced many outside Spain they had to make a stand. Thousands of volunteers, many of them communists, flocked to join the International Brigade and fight fascism. But by now it was Hitler who was emerging as the greatest threat to peace. He was starting to redraw the map.
Since the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919, there have been only a few really momentous days in the history of Europe. Today comes another such mighty moment, as Hitler's bomb bursting finally carries Nazi expansion across the borders of Germany into the land of his birth.
All the talk about the best way of avoiding war was being overtaken by Hitler's actions. Karl Nagel had now joined the new German army.
I sat on my horse just short of the border. At 8 o'clock, the barrier went up. Our army band marched ahead with fife and drum. The Austrians stood in crowds beyond the border. They greeted us, waving swastika flags and chanting loudly, "One people, one empire, one Führer."
Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. Es war ein erhebendes Gefühl.
It was an uplifting feeling. Brother Nation was finally reunited with Brother Nation.
Though the union was expressly forbidden by Versailles, the British and French did nothing. Germany's new neighbor, Czechoslovakia, remained the most successful of the states created after 1918. With a democratic government, it was a true child of the Treaty of Versailles, endeavoring to unite Czechs, Slovaks, and its German speakers under one flag. Prague was the thriving capital of a country which had the strongest economy in Central Europe, based on the industry of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. But Czechs felt increasingly threatened. They knew they were now in Hitler's sights, as a country where, as he saw it, Slavs ruled Germans. When Hitler said that the German-speaking Sudetenland should be part of Germany again, the Czechs were defiant.
Lidi na lidi jsou jako saně, člověk na člověka jako kat. Podívejte se na ně, musíte naříkat. Oprdopití mužíka mydlí, domnívají se, že vyhraje. Klidně seďme na židli, čtěme Bibli, tam to všechno je. Samuelova kniha nám povídá, jak na Žida přišla veliká bída, jak ti víni filištíni válku vůbec nebyli nyní, až potkali Davida. David šel do války, volky nevolky, velké dálky nesl bratrům homolky.
With their large army, the Czechs prepared to defend themselves against a German attack.
Hej, hej, kam se válej, ty jsou malej.
Troops took up positions along the border with Germany. They strengthened their defenses, and they expected Britain and France, the strongest remaining democracies, would come to their aid. Joseph Beldar worked on the bunkers.
Mezi náma byla nálada fantastická, my jsme si uvědomovali,
the morale amongst us was fantastic.
Přispíváme k obraně vlasti. Ať jsme nebyli vojáky, tak to
We knew we were helping with the defense of our country. Even though we weren't soldiers, we were very proud we were able to do our bit to defend our homeland.
Umožněno k té obraně vlasti přispět.
The League of Nations was now shown to be irrelevant. Britain and France decided to sort out the problem with Germany and make a deal. Britain's Prime Minister made several visits to see Hitler. The British crowds rejoiced when Chamberlain came back from Munich. They believed what everyone wanted to believe, that by giving in to Hitler and allowing him to have the Sudetenland, peace had been secured.
So our Prime Minister has come back from his third and greatest journey, and he said
that the settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace. This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine.
France's Prime Minister Daladier also flew home from Munich. He thought the settlement was a prelude to war, not peace, and that Hitler would not be satisfied. Etienne Crouchanel was with him.
The atmosphere was so oppressive when we arrived at Le Bourget that when we saw this huge crowd, we thought they must have come to hiss and boo us. When we stopped on the runway, instead of the hissing and booing we were expecting, there was a sea of applause and enthusiasm to greet us. This was impossible for us to understand. Daladier turned round, I can still hear him, towards the man nearest to him and said, "But these people are mad."
It was the high point of wishful thinking. The people of France and Britain were elated and relieved. But the Czechs felt betrayed. The League of Nations had done nothing for them. Czech speakers in the Sudetenland had to choose between living in Nazi Germany or fleeing their homes as refugees.
Many people were leaving, and they were terribly distressed because they had no idea what was going to happen to them. The disappointment overcame us. We cursed our Western allies, especially the French and the English.
10 days after Munich, German troops crossed the Czech border into the Sudetenland. Once more, Karl Nagel's regiment was there.
When the order came at 2 o'clock to march in peacefully, we loaded up the vehicles, got on our horses and marched over the border. The Sudeten Germans had already hurried to the border. They welcomed us with joy and with tears in their eyes.
We were so happy we cried. We were scattering flowers, we were completely overjoyed. I have to say it, or I'm not supposed to say it, but this was the happiest day in our lives for the whole family.
That autumn, the Czechs celebrated the anniversary of their independence with a sense of foreboding. 20 years after the birth of the country and the creation of the League of Nations, their exercise in self-determination was doomed. In March 1939, the Germans invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia and occupied Prague. Jiří Sturza, who'd seen the Austrians leave in 1918, saw the Germans arrive.
My uncle came to us that morning and said, "Those bastards marched into Prague. Prague is occupied by the German army." We went into town and saw that the German armoured vehicles and troops were there. What could we do? Nothing. We couldn't fight them with bare hands.
Co se dalo dělat? Nemohli jsme dělat nic. S holýma rukama jsme proti ním nemohli
vystoupit. The fact is, though, people shook their fists at them.
Lidi prostě na ně hrozili a že je prostě ti Němci to chápali.
The German-speaking Czechs, and I think even the soldiers felt embarrassed.
To chápalo trapně, že ty Němci museli snad mít dojem, že prostě tady jsou nenáviděni. To museli vidět.
As we rode through Czechoslovakia, they threatened us. They clenched their fists. We didn't understand what they said, but they made it quite clear they didn't want us.
The independent nation, born in 1919, no longer existed. Hitler had now occupied a neighboring country without even pretending he was reuniting German people.
In this historic hour, the fate of Europe and perhaps the whole world trembles in the balance. The map of Europe, which has been so ruthlessly changed during the recent years of so-called peace, has now become increasingly a matter of vital interest to each and every one of us. Austria and Czechoslovakia, not to mention Abyssinia and Albania, have changed hands with appalling facility. Throughout this time, Britain has held tenaciously that there is no problem that cannot be solved by peaceful negotiation. Were this opinion shared by the Chancellor of the German Reich, it would not now be necessary for Britain to stand to arms and cry halt. Aggression must be stopped.
The Germans did not halt, and by now, in the summer of 1939, any hope that the problems could be solved by negotiation had gone.
So beseitigte man Grenzen, mit denen die Hassapostel von Versailles glaubten, deutsche Volksgenossen vom Deutschen Reich trennen zu können.
That September, German troops invaded Poland. Karl Nagel reached the last stage of his journey to war.
On September the 1st at 4 a.m., we prepared to attack. My first experience of the war was when one of my unit was shot off his horse by a Pole. I thought, now we're exchanging fire. Now it is war.
When news of the war in Europe reached the United States, most Americans still felt it was no concern of theirs.
I haven't the slightest idea of European affairs.
Let Europe fight her own battles. Another war, not for me. This time America should keep out, and I know I will.
And another American president had to decide if the United States would get involved.
I have said not once but many times that I have seen war and that I hate war. I say that again and again. I hope the United States will keep out of this war. I believe that it will. And I give you assurance and reassurance that every effort of your government will be directed toward that end, as long as it remains within my power to prevent, there will be no blackout of peace in the United States.
That autumn, all over Europe, young men were going into the army.
These men of 20 and 21 received their calling up notices before the declaration of war. But they're a fine body of men, ready and willing to play their part in the hard job that lies ahead. And their first experience of the army is to receive a whole lot of kit and a perfectly beautiful haircut.
Walter Hare, who'd fought at the Somme, now had a son of 16.
When I saw there was another war, I felt pretty down. I thought we'd wasted our time. I was most concerned because my son was growing up and he'd soon be military age. It's not fair. It's not fair that I did my bit and now that my son is going to have to do what we failed to do.
Les anciens combattants se refusent à l'idée d'un calvaire qu'ils voulaient épargner à leurs enfants.
Marcel Batreau, who'd fought at Verdun, had no children, and he was called up again, aged 44.
I would never have thought that we'd be stupid enough to go to war again. We behaved like someone whose neighbor is a thief, who knows he'll steal from him, but who doesn't lock his door. That's how it was. They attacked us by surprise, and we weren't ready.
Mais eux, ils avaient la ferme intention de nous attaquer et nous attaquer par surprise alors qu'on n'était pas prêts.
I never thought I'd be called up again 20 years later. I just didn't think of that. I was very sad when I received my call-up papers. I said, those bastards.
The new international organization designed to ensure there would be no more wars had failed. It was to be tried again with the United Nations in 1945. Before then, another 55 million lives would be lost in another world war.